Hi, I'm photographer David Flores, and welcome to the B&H Photo live stream introducing Nikon's brand new D850 camera. Now we have a fantastic panel of guests put together, image makers, photographers, and storytellers, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce them right now. We have Brittany Lee, photographer, YouTuber, runner of Snapchick.com. How you doing today, Brittany? You were just out in Yellowstone shooting?
I was. I think Yellowstone is always going to be incredible, but I had a bear encounter.
Oh my goodness.
And I did, and so it was life-changing.
Well, thanks so much for coming and being with us here. We have Andrew Hancock, a commercial advertising and sports photographer, and a man that has more frequent flyer miles and hotel points than I think I can count. Where are you coming in from today, man?
Coming in from Indianapolis. So.
And that's home.
That's home. Native Texan, but been home based out of Indy for some time, and it's a great place to be. So.
Man, it's so great to have you here. And we have Matthew Jordan Smith, beauty, celebrity, photographer extraordinaire, and you are celebrating your first freshman year living in Tokyo full time. But you're a New Yorker. It's good to have you back.
Yeah, thank you. I'm from New York originally, yes, but Tokyo is like New York on steroids.
Well, it's wonderful to have you all here today. Before we get started into our discussion, it's important to note we're going to be giving away a brand new D850 body at the end of our live stream here. So if you have questions for the panelists or about the D850 or photography in general, shoot them at us. Use the hashtag BHPhotoLive. That's BHPhotoLive. And you'll automatically be entered in a drawing for a brand new Nikon D850 camera body. All right. So just to kind of set up the camera, we're going to take a really quick look, a short version of our B&H first look introducing the D850. I'm going to play that clip for you right now. Hi, I'm photographer David Flores, and today we're going to be testing out Nikon's brand new D850. We're going to put it through its paces, see what it's all about. The camera is incredibly fast in single-point autofocus. If you're a portraitist or you shoot headshots, you're gonna love this performance. Very, very similar to what you see in the D5 with the exception of a larger optical viewfinder. The capacitive touch LCD screen on the back of the camera. You can use this for the usual suspect features, being able to scroll through your photographs. But if you move your finger to the edge of the screen, you can also use it to scroll through a large quantity of images. The brand new 45.7 megapixel backside illuminated sensor creates sick files. The D850 body by itself can shoot up to 7 high-resolution RAW plus JPEG images. When you add the optional grip and an EN-EL18A or B battery, you can get that up to 9 frames per second. We had our dancer come at us natural light on a single plane, and we were able to keep our subject in focus moving forward and backward at medium and high speeds. I can just fire up the live view, hold the camera out in front of me, touch the focus, and there, I've got the shot. I found this to be a really invaluable tool, especially if you're somebody that likes to be spontaneous on a set, or if you have like a really hard angle to get to and you need to get there very, very quickly. All right, so 4K video, the D850 does it 2 different ways. You can use the full width of the sensor, which downsamples to 4K. That's the FX mode. You can also go in and shoot DX 4K. There's a little bit of a crop. HD, you get it in flavors of 24, 25, and 30. There's even an in-camera slow motion feature, up to 120 frames per second, and this is all in camera. There's even an 8K time-lapse feature that uses an internal intervalometer that allows you to make up to 9,999 frames. So here I am setting up the studio in beautiful 8K. Now, obviously you're not watching 8K there at home, but all of the movement that you see, you can affect all of that from the comfort of your nonlinear editor. So that's our first look at the brand new Nikon D850. I'm photographer David Flores. See you next time. Well, I had a great time using the camera in studio, getting my hands on it. It was so much fun using a single lens reflex camera again, where there's a reason to kind of advance the format. I had a great time. First impressions were it was just fast, and of course the resolution of the sensor was awesome. But I'm wondering, and maybe we can start with you, Lee, just talking about some of your initial impressions of the camera, some things that stood out, how it felt to use.
That's a good question, because I feel like what I'm looking for in a camera is something that's easy to use and something that's easy to hold on to. So if I'm out at Yellowstone or at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, I want the whole camera to work together as a whole and be reliable and to be consistent.
Yeah, no, you got a chance to shoot with it yesterday, and these are some of your images from out on the High Line. Shout out to Crystal here, our amazing B&H production coordinator. What was it like out there?
Yes, the beautiful Crystal was nice enough to come out in the midday sun. We were hiding in the shade in these shots, but we kind of just tested out how everything worked together, like I just said. And one of the things that we did test out was autofocus and the frame rate and how those work together. And everything went great.
And you've used, you're Nikon D500 user, you used the D810. Was it pretty comfortable just picking up the new body?
It was. I've used several different camera brands, but I come back to Nikon again and again. So this was, I would expect nothing less from them. And it just felt like another Nikon camera that was just a little bit better.
That's cool. Now, Andrew, you shot just about every Nikon body to death with the amount of frames you put through a camera. Can you talk about your experience in picking up the D850? Did you feel at home, or was there anything?
It was incredibly familiar, and it's like an old friend. You know, whenever we get the body to test with, we don't get a manual with it. You know, with the pre-production body, and so, you know, it's if you've been shooting Nikon, it's gonna be very familiar. You're gonna be able to do your normal tips and tricks with it and set up just like you want to. But the camera can do so much more than what we've previously been able to do. There's a whole host of new features, but I found it to be incredibly responsive and the most versatile camera I've ever picked up.
How are you making these images? Are you flying, or what's going on?
Yeah, we chartered a helicopter, and so those are above New York, and my focus was to kind of test out what the camera could do from a sports aspect and a commercial aspect, both in studio and on location. And so to really kind of put it through its paces and see if I could make it fail in any situation, we wanted to do as much as we could. And so we chartered a helicopter and shot from the air. We shot some really high ISO portraits in an alleyway. Some of the portraits I did with the bodybuilder, we actually shot at 5,000 ISO, like that one there. That's 5,000 ISO.
And how'd that hold up? It looks gorgeous.
I would have no problem sending it to an editor. So it was a lot of fun. Everything that we put it through, it just responded. So it was incredibly impressive.
What was the first thing that you customized on the body?
I set my focus. You know, whenever you get it, it's always in program mode. I'm like, nope, throw that away, put it in manual. And then aside from that, I set my focus for back button, and then customize it to put it on continuous, and then single point, and I'm ready to go. So.
Oh, these are just fantastic. Where'd you shoot this one? There was
the last one. We were in a river, a creek outside Indianapolis, and I just wanted to try out the SB 5000s because you can use this new body with those wireless speed lights as well. And oftentimes when I'm shooting with light, I'm using heavy lights just like you are. But it was really refreshing to kind of channel my inner Joe McNally and Dave Black and go speed lights for a little bit and have some fun with it, and just had a blast. So.
Man, Matthew, you pick up the camera and you're working with a celebrity or high-end client. Obviously, you have to know that thing when you pick it up. It seems like getting the camera out of the way is like 9/10 of the job sometimes.
But I had the camera probably a day before I was shooting, and it felt comfortable right away. My first impression, I was blown away by the speed and resolution. Mm-hmm. I loved being able to shoot square. Oh, I mean,
and are these shot in square that we're looking at here?
This is square. This is square. So we're in the studio. This is my first moments having the camera, shooting, and it just felt organically simple, easy. It was wonderful. Now, I was used to shooting with the 810, which is a great camera. Mm-hmm. And people have asked me, oh, should I change from the 810 to this? Absolutely. It's not an upgrade. It's a brand new camera. Incredible.
Now, what was the first square format camera that you shot with?
Man, my first square. I'm going way, way, way back. I shot Hasselblad for sure back in the day. I shot, first one was probably a, was it a Rolleiflex?
Or TLR.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I love the format, when you're composing in the square, it's a beautiful thing, but one of the problems like with the single lens reflex camera, and you're cropping to square, you can't really see it, but the D850 has this really cool feature where you kind of fade out on the sides.
Yes,
you can see what you're doing.
You can change your color from yellow to red, whatever you want it to be, and that's kind of cool. Having that, blocked out that way, it even changes the way you shoot. I wasn't aware how much it would affect how I compose my images, but it changed everything. And I set my camera up where I could shoot it both, in full and square. I could go back and forth in an instant, and that was cool as I'm shooting and playing around with it. But I loved square. I'm gonna be a square man from now on.
I love it. I can't wait to see some of that. Now, Lee, just thinking of like all of the work that you do for social and your large audience that you manage, Square is obviously a final output type of format that you're thinking about. And I'm wondering, anything came to you while you were shooting with the Nikon, thinking in those terms, like moving to a square output for social?
Definitely. I rarely take a photo that I don't already know what I want the end result to be. So being able to see in the viewfinder what that's going to look like, that's awesome. And I think also for my viewers, a lot of them aren't experienced photographers. A lot of them are complete beginners. And to be able to visualize exactly what that photo's going to look like, I think that could be really helpful for people.
No, that's super cool. Like so many of the images I think that we consume now, and even the way that we make them, they're in that 1:1 aspect ratio. And Andrew, really for you, I'm curious because with all of the editorial, the commercial work that you do, and you do sport also, that some of this stuff is going to wind up in square. Have you ever thought about maybe trying to compose that way, or do you get like questions about?
It's certainly something I'm gonna try out. But my roots are as a photojournalist, and so I've always kind of stuck to that native aspect ratio. But having the 1:1 is really engaging, and different projects and assignments I'm doing for clients, whether it's a pro or collegiate team. And if we're telling the story behind the scenes and with the action of the day, having that is a nice feature because we'll be telling stories and creating something that's going to go strictly for Instagram. Mm-hmm. And so that way we can kind of crop immediately to that 1:1 and, from the start and know what it's going to look like. And I kind of welcome a bit of a change of pace. I think it'll be nice.
That's so cool. I think one thing that we have to mention is that to date, this is Nikon's highest resolution DSLR, dealing with 45.7 megapixels. So even with an in-camera crop, or if you're cropping in post, you feel pretty confident about what it is that you're making. But, where that's definitely like a high order bid feature of the camera, I think there's also some things that we need to think about. So for you and using the camera, what are some of the things maybe that maybe there's some advantages for you for the higher resolution, and maybe there's some considerations for your workflow that you need to think about before you're jumping into this extreme resolution situation? Maybe we could start with you on that, Matthew.
Well, it can't be too much resolution for me. I love the ability to shoot and have files that look this amazing. Now, yes, you do need to have the storage for it. I've got 32 terabytes, so I'm not worried about that. But I know in terms of the past where you're shooting and you're slowed down by having large files, this one didn't. I'm shooting in studio. It wasn't any waiting for the buffer. It wasn't waiting on resolution. It wasn't waiting on focus. It just worked. And I love that. It didn't get in the way. It helped with the work.
And as a sports shooter, Andrew, you have resolution needs, but you have speed needs too. And I think historically with these higher resolution cameras that have been at market, you're sacrificing on frame rate and in a lot of cases autofocus as well. I wonder if you can speak to the D850 in that realm for you. Would you feel comfortable maybe shooting a game with it?
Absolutely. I was at a baseball game yesterday, and I wish I had the 850 in my hands. It's really a joy to shoot, but it keeps up. Regardless of the situation you put it in. It's going to keep up, and resolution for me still the more the merrier. But being able to shoot at 7 or 9 frames a second, you're going to go through a lot of data really quickly, and so it's going to add up. So that's the one thing you want to keep in mind. And but it especially from the autofocus standpoint, it tracks. I by and large shoot with 810s and D5s exclusively. Those are my two workhorses. But there's a big step in difference in performance between the 810 and the D5 when it comes to autofocus. Mm-hmm. But the 850 kept right up. We did some late evening stuff right at sunset with a water skier. And it was going to be really tough. I was standing in about 6 feet of water, and I had no housing on the body, and so I'm holding it right above water level. And so as the boat comes by you at 30-something miles an hour, and he goes to the buoy on the other side, whenever he appears, you have roughly half a second to nail the focus, another half a second to make the picture, and then he's past the buoy, and your peak moment's gone. Right. And the first time I saw him, boom, it just locked on, and it was ready to go, and it was incredibly impressive.
Yeah, and with that speed, we should talk about this. So body alone, you're at 7 frames per second. When you add the optional grip, you can get up to 9 frames per second. Now, Lee, I think you and I are kind of a lot alike in this way. We use a lot of different cameras, and then with those cameras, we use them a lot of different ways. And for your use case and all the field trips and adventures that you find yourself out on, I was wondering if there's instances where you feel like maybe you'll be bringing that grip, or maybe you'll be leaving it in the bag at the hotel or at home.
I typically don't use grips just so that I can keep things a little bit lighter.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like with 7 frames per second, I'm not going to be left wanting, but I do like that option.
You shot with it a little bit up on the Highline with the grip, right?
No, I didn't.
use that?
No, I haven't used the grip. I had, all 7 frames per second though.
Oh man, it's so cool. The focus system
It is.
really, it's fast. The focus system is essentially the same as what you have in the D5. Like, I'm using that camera. So there's 153 autofocus points, but the way that you see all of this looks a little different. Like, one of my aha moments with the camera was picking it up, and I had a 24-70 on it, and looked through the finder, and it was an immediate shock because the magnification on this is the largest on any DSLR right now. And I was wondering if we can speak to that, because there is the high volume camera market sort of, you see some shifts, people using electronic finders or LCD screens, but there's still something about a beautiful, well-crafted optical viewfinder with a killer prism. I'm just wondering maybe what some of your impressions might be on working with that.
There's nothing better than this. I've shot others, and this feels good. It works. It's not waiting for it's not doing any light fluctuations like you get with other. It just works. It's simple. It's easy, the way it should be.
You're not waiting on a refresh rate.
Yes,
customizing
exactly.
that, like your eyes doing the thing. What about for you, Andrew?
For me, I look at screens enough as it is. So it's nice to be able to look through that optical viewfinder. And you mentioned putting a 24-70 on it, and for me, it's just as refreshing whenever I'm looking through a 400 or a 600 with it. I mean, and everything just looks so crisp and clear, and then the autofocus just tracks. I mean, it's really just a pleasure to shoot. So,
what was the first lens you had on it?
It would be a picture I took right there, and that was a 21-8, and that was the first time I ever took it out of the bag, and that was while I was on vacation with my family, and my youngest was up before anybody else, as she usually is, and that we finally had a morning where we were going to have a good sunrise, and so we pulled it out and walked down to the beach and made some pictures. So.
Oh, beautiful shot.
Thanks.
Where are you here?
For that time, I'm actually on the boat, photographing our water skier, run the slalom course, and we're shot that about 0.008 of a second, I think, and just wanted to see what it would look like silhouette and see how it would hold on to the highlights and the tonal range we'd get out of it. And as impressed as I was with the camera when we learned the specs in the initial conference call, all the expectations were met, but where it really kind of blew me away is when I looked at a raw file for the first time. And we had it on screen, and I'm just like, that was the real aha moment for me, was, wow, this is something special. So.
Yeah. How you work with stuff is a gorgeous shot. Man. Now, Lee, you used Nikon for a long time, and obviously there's handling and tactile considerations that are big to you. But from an image standpoint, like, what are some of the things that stand out to you about the look of Nikon? Is there a look or some aesthetic that you like about the system for making images?
That's a good question. With the camera bodies, and I'm going to hold it.
Oh,
because,
yeah. You have to.
Because I like holding it. But I think that everybody has their own preferences with regard to how they want their camera to feel. Mm-hmm. But really, it's where the buttons are, how the menus are all laid out. That's one of the reasons why I keep coming back to Nikon. It just feels more intuitive for me. I do have viewers who say the opposite, and they say they like other brands better for those reasons. Same thing with an optical viewfinder versus an electronic viewfinder. I have viewers who swear by their electronic viewfinders, but I mean, it was pretty funny yesterday when I picked up the camera and put it up to my face. I had to adjust how my face was on the camera because there was more to look at. Like, I was actually looking around the frame inside the viewfinder.
That's the coolest.
And more is better.
Yeah. It was kind of like Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
Kind of like, wow.
And one thing I appreciate about it is it's got a new deeper grip.
That's
and
true.
so the ergonomics were already great, but for me it's improved. And whenever you've got heavy glass on it, like you've got the 105, 1.4 there, and it's nice to have a little bit of a deeper grip, and you feel a lot more connected with it. So.
And that's a marriage made in heaven. That 105 with that body is insane.
Yeah, we need to kind of talk about that for a second, because this lens is very quickly becoming one of my favorite portrait lenses.
It is my
period.
favorite.
Oh, well.
Hands down. That's my favorite lens right now. That 105 and that 850 is magic. Also, another thing I want to touch on is shooting black and white. The ability to shoot black and white and see it in the image as you're shooting it is incredible. It's one thing to imagine it and try to put it in pose to make it black and white, but it doesn't always work that way. You can change and shoot in black and white mode, and you have what looks like real black and white. The tonal range is just incredible.
That's really nice. It's really nice. Now,
Like in this image.
Here we got some good instances. Now, you shot these in camera black and white?
In camera, black and white. This is nothing done. This is just straight out of camera. So I'm shooting this way, and we're in studio, and I'm seeing the image on the back of the monitor. It's just beautiful. And then the magic was going and seeing it on my computer screen and seeing the resolution. And this is all as we shot. This is nothing done. This is just straight out of camera.
The mid-tone detail is incredible in these shots.
Incredible.
And we're not losing anything. Shadows are clean. Highlights look beautiful. Like,
No,
hard to
I
get
was
that.
in love with this camera from first impression, first day. And I had to get the cameras back at the end of the day.
yeah,
and that
that
broke
hurts.
my heart. Can I just hold that camera for a second again? This is my first time holding it again since I shot.
I'm glad you brought that up with the dynamic range and the shadow and light, because we were shooting midday and there was harsh shadow and bright light, and I was surprised by how it maintained detail in both ends of the spectrum.
It's hard. And you can check it. One thing that's cool that I love on the camera is you can flip over into the live view, especially if you're shooting kind of in a natural light situation. You're not dealing with the strobe, or if you're dealing with a constant light, you get that's a very accurate screen. That screen is so sharp.
It is a very accurate screen. That also blew me away. Extremely accurate. The color range, the tones, it's the best one I've seen so far.
Now, do you ever employ live view in anything that you shoot, Andrew? Ever
Frequently, actually.
Okay.
And one thing I love about it, and I'm really glad that it's got the articulating screen in the back, because especially from a sports perspective, I'm always trying to get in as many different positions that I can put myself in. Whether I'm laying down on the ground or I'm up in a catwalk. But when you're setting up remote cameras, if I'm putting something up, say on top of a shot clock, I'm 6'4", but still that's going to be above me, and there's no way that I'm going to be able to look through the viewfinder. And so I can just flip that screen down and be able to look and be able to critical focus exactly where I need to. I mean, it's a godsend. I mean, I love having this. So, I mean, the 750 saw regular work in my bag because it was so great for remotes. And then this is going to be used widely for that. And at 9 frames a second, it's going to keep up with everything. If I'm putting something up at an elevated perspective, I'm probably going to go without the battery grip, just because that's another thing that can come loose, and I want everything to be as stable and rigid on there as possible. But having that viewfinder that you can just kick out, and that way it's above me. If you're in a scrum after the game, you can turn that on, and your Hail Mary has a lot more accuracy at that point. So
It's a nice thing to have.
absolutely.
Yeah, not to change the subject
No.
too much, but with shooting in live view, the silent shutter function, I was blown away, because that is something that you get with non-DSLRs. And with the combination of silent shutter and the flip out LCD screen, I felt like I could potentially kind of disappear as a photographer. And I think there's so many situations where
Absolutely.
where you want to disappear. I have a new nephew. My sister just had a baby, and I was in there that first morning in the hospital, and clacking away, of course. But I felt I tried to be as small as possible, but I was still making noise. So, oh my gosh, that would have been perfect to be silent
guys
like
who are
that.
shooting on a movie set, who used blimps in the past to put the cameras in, now you don't need that.
Same thing with golf. You're not allowed to shoot in the backswing. And so, before I've known people that have used, mirrorless and compacts because they can do it silently. But now you can just flip that screen out. You can put the camera on the ground and shoot like that, and shoot through the entire backswing and not make a sound. So.
And the focus is super accurate. And I think it's nice
fantastic.
because you can focus. You have the option to either use touch for focus or touch, focus, and shoot. like right from the screen. So if you only want to interact with the screen, great. Or if you just want to use the screen as an autofocus selector, that's cool too. I'm sure that's extremely helpful if you're trying to set the camera at an odd angle. I think event photographers will like that as well. If you're working with a remote setup, that electronic shutter is absolutely awesome. All right, well, let's talk about like overall quality for the image, because there's a lot of great cameras that are out there. Like, what are use cases for everyone? Going with something that's this high resolution. What are some of the things you think you might be doing with it, or why go to 45.7 megapixels? Maybe we can start with you there, Matthew.
I think number one, you have no idea how you'll use these pictures in the future. Right now, you're like, okay, I'll use it for Instagram or whatever, but what if you want to have an exhibit of all your work in a year and you need these big files? You have it. Mm-hmm. I want as much resolution as possible all the time.
I find myself in a situation of I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And that's,
Been there.
and it's tough on my assistant sometimes whenever we're packing up all the equipment for a shoot and not knowing exactly what all we're going to use. I'm like, well, I don't know if we'll use that, but we might, so let's throw it in there. And I'd rather have the resolution, and oftentimes, especially from the commercial side of sports, if I'm doing stuff for various teams, the pictures are going up on the side of the stadium, and so, but they're also going on social. So you'd like to have that versatility, and I'd rather have too much of an image and more resolution than I would probably need than not enough, and you're having to blow it up.
Okay. And for you, Lee, like going to massive resolution, massive file size, what are some of the use cases that you think might be popping up on the field trips?
Well, definitely backups. I like to have my photos backed up, and then I like to have my backups backed up before I leave. Mm-hmm. And whether that be external drives or the cloud, you're going to have to, that's going to have to be a consideration. I think my viewers would absolutely be angry with me if I didn't mention that, it's a consideration. But gosh, it's nice to have. It's really nice to have all of that stuff to work with, all of that resolution to work with.
And you can see it right away. I mean, you see a file from the past versus what this camera's doing, and you see it right away. It's incredible.
Yeah, the resolution. I think it's, for me, I'm excited about it from a portraiture standpoint, and the familiarity of the design of the camera. Like single lens reflex is just something very pure and healthy about holding that body. And I shoot a good deal of digital medium format, but it's nice having something that can move, that's this nimble and this compact, where you can get a super high resolution file, make a great compelling portrait, and you know what you're doing. You're not hunting around for anything funny. You're not dealing with a weird design logic to the menu system or the control layout. I think it's really, really, really fantastic. So I want to jump to something that I think has been popping up in all of our work. So we make a lot of stills, but there's a question now about making moving images or complementary moving image pieces that can come along with what we do. And those may take the form of actual video, or they may take the form of time-lapse. And Lee, I know you're doing a lot of this in social, so maybe you can start us off there talking about this intersection with the still image and with the moving image.
Definitely. Definitely. That is what I do every day. And I use my Nikon DSLRs for video in the studio. I haven't found them to be the very best in the field. Again, gotta be honest with my folks out there, but not impossible. And I feel like it's getting better and better with every camera release. But that studio footage where I can manually focus on myself and then hop right into that field of view, the footage it's beautiful. It is. I have so many viewers comment. There's rarely a video out there where somebody doesn't comment about I usually shoot in 1080p at 60 frames per second, and there's rarely a time when someone doesn't comment on how crisp it looks.
Awesome. Right. Andrew, I'm sure you probably get a few video requests now.
I do, especially with sports publications. By and large, having a much more of a footprint online from the work I do with ESPN and the Players Tribune. And I was doing a story in Miami right after I shot the football national championship game back in February. And you're with these baseball players training, and you're in the batting cage, and then one of the guys starts just kind of dropping some knowledge, and you just quickly flip to video, and you just kind of let this guy kind of talk. And it's nice to be able to seamlessly go from one to the next. And I haven't used the previous bodies for a ton of video work. I'm really looking forward to putting this on some stabilizers and some sticks and see what it can do. So.
Yeah. Paces.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It seems like it works well for inserts. 'Cause, I mean, the footage is pretty neutral. Sure. At least my experience with Nikon and videos, the footage, at least from the color point of view, and I think I feel this way too with stills and the raw files. You can get them where you need to get them, but kind of starting at that more neutral color palette, right. It's a little bit easier to blend it if you have to do it down and dirty and fast. And it's an SLR, so I think that's also a thing that we have to say here. It's a DSLR. Sure. Mm-hmm. So video is
a real camera.
It's not video camera is a video camera, and this is a DSLR. It does both things, and I think you can certainly make a show or production on DSLR, and people do. But it's a really great thing for picking up pieces and getting good inserts in, or collaborating with other folks. For beauty, video requests, anything popping up for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Beauty is moving like everything else, where you're being asked now to produce pieces that are beyond just a still image. Mm-hmm. It's just the natural evolution, and this camera rocks. I haven't played with it yet in terms of video, but I'm dying to.
Mm-hmm. I had a great experience, during our B&H first look working with it. It's hard because you're trying to create a tone with the still images, and you want some video stuff to run in parallel. And those setups in the studio, it was a lot of fun to kind of be able to look through the glass, making the stills, and then go over to video, and you're getting really in terms of depth and just the feel, the signature of it. It's just it's very nice to have this tool that you can create a story or a narrative with it, where they run in parallel, your stills and your video. So let's talk about time-lapse, because there's a little bit of this stuff in the camera. Now, Lee, do you do time-lapse in camera? Do much of that stuff?
No, I don't, and I didn't have a chance to play with that on this one.
You guys, anybody doing any of that stuff?
Well, here's the thing. In the past, I've been leery about it because I didn't want to kill my shutter.
Yeah.
What I love about this camera is if you shoot 10,000 frames, it's only recording one as on your shutter, so you're not killing your camera frame, mm-hmm. your shutter at all.
Going back to that electronic shutter idea, if you're setting it up, and it's worth noting, the intervalometer is built into the camera. You don't have to buy a remote to plug in or do any software. It's right there in the camera. And when you do switch over, how many frames do you put through a camera in a given?
I can't even imagine. I mean,
a lot of numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I had a shoot in June, a big portrait shoot for school, and I think over the course of a week went through 15,000 frames on the 810. I mean, we can go through them in a hurry. I mean, from a football game. Yeah. I mean, if I'm really hammering on it, I mean, you're going to see between 4,000 and 8,000 frames, especially if you're doing remotes like we would at the Super Bowl or something like that. I mean, they're going to add up in a hurry.
Yeah, and every frame that you put through that camera is one less that you're going to be able to put the wear on, whether that's the mirror assembly or that's the physical shutter. Sure. So if you are doing, if you're in a time-lapse type of application, or if you just spontaneously want to play around with this as a storytelling tool, it's there without any physical wear on the camera, which is super
fantastic.
Cool. And I love the frame rates that are built into the camera. For 4K, you have the cinematic usual suspect, your 24 frame. But then there's a built-in slow motion mode that goes 120 frames per second in camera. And I know there's a lot of folks out there that love shooting at high frame rate and then doing the conform in post-production, taking that high frame rate footage and adjusting the speed, getting it to where it needs to be on a timeline. But I think what's lovely about this is if you've got an idea to do something in slow motion, whether it's a move with beauty or something with sport or a lifestyle field trip type of thing, you can just set that right in camera. You get a file that's automatically processed in slow motion, and you can just drag it right into the timeline.
For beauty, it's going to be amazing.
Give me are you gonna be a filmmaker here, Matthew?
Well, I mean,
gotta
it
ask,
does. I've always loved images, be it a moving image or still. I love telling a story. Shooting a celebrity, or you're shooting a fashion story or a beauty story. You're telling a story, and this is just part of the process that helps you tell your story in a better way.
I'm really excited about the application, especially the slow motion feature, and it's just another tool in the box to be able to tell a story, visually, and then that's what makes it all so exciting. So if I'm in a studio and we're working with athletes and we're trying to spray them down and get them all sweaty, and then kind of sometimes while they're getting ready, we can flip it over and just get some B-roll video, and so it's all part of the total package on what you can put together and deliver to a client. Just gives you another tool.
It gives you possibilities that we haven't had before, and that just opens up another world. Shooting square, shooting black and white, shooting slow motion. It's more possibilities. That's what we all need.
Now, Lee, out of all of us here on the panel, you're probably the person that is most evenly split on all of the stuff that you have to make, like with photo and with video. So are there any features like on the video end that maybe jumped out at you that were surprising or challenging?
I didn't use video on the D850, but I have on a lot of other DSLRs. I regularly do on my D500 and on my D810, and I really expect nothing less from this camera. The things that jump out at me are your options. You do have options for 24 frames per second, which has a much more cinematic look, or for me on YouTube, 60 frames per second works spectacularly for my audience. Also, anything that I can do in camera. So like you said earlier, the color, it looks great. I almost never do any color grading or anything on my video files. And then just being able to get slow-mo in the camera, things like that. The less time I can spend at my computer afterwards, the better. And if I can do it all on the camera.
We should talk about this, because there's, in any kind of conversation about a camera coming out, it's about the raw file, the dynamic range, how hard you can push the file. Spoiler alert, you can push these files really well. Okay, that's not a question. But something that we don't talk about a lot is the JPEG engine on a camera. And if you need to deliver something, whether it's like a rough select for a client or you want to share a personal photograph with someone, you're going to do it in that form that is easy to share and is standardized and doesn't require weird software to process through. And I just wanted to get your impressions of the JPEG engine on the camera and JPEG in general. No one asks this question, so I want to ask you all. Maybe we can start with you on that, Matthew?
Yeah, I think, I shot JPEG and RAW when I was shooting my segment. And yeah, you do want something you can use fast and put out right away. And the JPEG is great for that. It's easy to look at. If I want to shoot, and whether I'm tethered or using a Wi-Fi device, like a cam range, something like that, to transport the image to a computer or iPad for a client, it worked perfectly. No problems. I'm shooting fast.
Yeah. And the higher resolution these screens are that are on a set, people
see everything.
They see everything. Like, is it too sharp? Is it too soft? Is the color there? And you're happy with what you're...
I'm beyond happy. I want that camera back.
Can hold it again.
Now, Andrew, you have crazy turnaround on the things that you're doing, and I'm just wondering, like, are there instances where JPEG becomes an important part of your workflow?
Absolutely. I'm always shooting RAW plus JPEG. There's certain times whenever I'll switch just to RAW, and that typically will be in a portrait situation. But if I'm shooting a game for a client, oftentimes we're having to do RAW JPEG because we've got an editor back in the photo workroom, and they're ingesting as fast as they can, as well as runners that'll move the cards, and they're getting those up for online. But then we've got the RAW files, so we can hold that back for the magazine use, so we can color correct and do what we need to do with that. So we've got that option, and it's nice to have this much resolution, but be able to have the buffer that can keep up as well as it does. That's been really refreshing, so I don't have to worry about that too much. Now I'm probably gonna have to make sure I'm shooting on small JPEG whenever it gets back to the editors, so they can get them out as quickly as possible. But yeah, we'll use it frequently. So
that's cool.
51 frames before you hit the buffer is incredible.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Incredible.
We should talk about the cards on that. We crack open the side here. So
What are we looking at in there, Andrew? What do
We
you
got
see?
XQD and an SD. So.
Okay, right. So if you're using like the standard readily available SD card, you're there. For those raw files, the QXD is where you
Want to be.
That's where you want to be,
Absolutely.
especially if you're pushing for the speed of it all. All right, so I want to very quickly, before we get into Q&A, I want to ask you out there, if you have more questions for us, please tweet them at us. Use the hashtag BHPhotoLive, that's BHPhotoLive, and that'll automatically put you in a drawing to win a brand new Nikon D850 camera body. All right.
But not this one. I'm taking this one.
You're going to take that one? I don't know, man. You got 3 of us up here.
Yeah,
that
we
may
know, I
not
know.
get
I'm
that
quick.
one. Well, any surprises that jumped out at you with the camera? You know, this is hard because the form factor of the SLR is, it's just been a form that's been around for such a long time now. In the professional realm, obviously it's a favored form factor, we like it very, very much. But were there any surprise? Not a whole lot of surprises like in the marketplace for SLR, but wondering if anything jumped out at you all with this particular camera. Any surprises? Maybe we can start with you, Matthew.
I think what hit me first was how, because again, we didn't have a manual. It was easy going through and setting things up. That was surprising for me. Without a manual at all. That was pretty simple. The ease of use, again, not having a manual, just picking it up and, just being organic with it, that was seamless.
I love it. Andrew?
For me, it met all my expectations, but the thing that did kind of take me by surprise was how good the buffer was, for a camera of this resolution, and especially coming from the 810. It was nice to be able to hammer on it whenever I had a football player running at me and it be able to keep up. And I was just like, wow, it's still going. And he just kind of looked down and, he's gone 20 yards. I'm like, all right, we're still doing great. And before it starts to slow down a little bit. So that was surprising. And how well it performed in low light. Typically the more megapixels, the more noise you're going to deal with.
Yeah.
And it held up. So I've got no problem shooting with this at a night game, indoors. I mean, it was, surprising. Every test we put it through, it passed everything that I did anyways. So
That's awesome. And Lee, you had it here in New York City?
I did.
Playing with it? What jumped out at you? What surprised you?
I did. Of course, the camera's great. I expected nothing less. I knew it would be a good camera. But things like the little features that I didn't expect to like very much, like the silent shutter. Also, I didn't expect to be interested in the focus peaking as much as I was. I saw it in action, and that would be really interesting. I have a lot of viewers who do macro photography, and I think something like that where they can look at the back of their camera and see in real time, what's in focus and what's not in focus clearly can be really helpful for them.
And I wish we had some video to show of how that focus peaking works, because you can assign a color.
You can assign a
your own
color.
Yeah.
Basically, the camera is going to light up in, whatever, there's like 5 colors that you can choose. In whatever color you choose, it's going to light up the most high contrast areas. So thought being that those are going to be the areas that are in focus. So that could be really, really helpful for a lot of people. And then the other kind of surprise for me was the high ISO performance.
Yeah.
When everybody else was at the diner ordering their lunches, they had their faces in their menus. I had my face in my D850, not my D850, but I wish. But I was testing out what the image would look like at the higher ISOs on my fork and knife on the table. And I was up at ISO 16,000 before I just stopped, because it was like, forget it. I don't need to worry about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and the images looked good. They were definitely usable.
Right.
Completely usable images. I had to zoom in to really see any grain at all.
Yeah, I love the way you compose with this camera. That was the big thing that jumped out for me. The optical viewfinder, I'm a big fan of optical viewfinders. That was awesome. The LCD screen on the back, what was such a big surprise for me about that was it was very much like what you have on the D5. With the pinch to zoom, the capacitive touch, and being able to scroll through selects. So if you're coming from that realm, it's really cool. And the fact that it's vari-angle was just super, super cool. And to just just to jump back, and I'm going to steal from you early. I love the focus peaking feature.
Yeah.
For video, it's amazing. But one thing, that you got to know is like if you're using it for video, it works in 1080, it works in HD. You don't have that in the 4K. So, sorry. Anyway, well, I think we should get to some questions. What do you all think? So, folks at home have been sending us some stuff. So let's refresh this here and see what we have. Okay, so our first question comes from Kilted View, and our question is, does the D850 have any specific HDR settings, or is auto bracketing still the way to go?
It does. It does have the HDR feature in JPEG only, I believe. I haven't confirmed that, but in all of the other Nikon cameras, it's JPEG only. And I've actually played with it because when I'm out, I think I was at Zion the first time I tried it. I was on the trail. I found it real quick in the menu because the menus are easy to navigate, and it's kind of fun. You can choose whether you use one shot or whether it's going to stay on indefinitely. So if you just want to play around with it, I have a lot of viewers who like HDR. If you just want to take one shot like I did, I just set it to that, and yeah, it's really nice.
Super cool. You make a lot of HDR?
Very, very rarely. It's been years since I've done one. I won't swear on it, but I think you might be able to do it with TIFF too. I'm not sure.
Maybe. I think you're right.
But I didn't get a chance to play with it. Didn't get that deep into it on this one. But that's another tool in the bag.
Yeah, true.
Super cool to have. All right, so let's go here. Can we control flash modes with the touchscreen? I'm looking forward to testing the D850. So can you control flash modes with the touchscreen? Anyone want to jump in on this?
I haven't tried that yet. Again, I only shot it one day in the studio, but I haven't tried it that way.
I didn't play around with the touchscreen at all, but if you can navigate the menus, I imagine you can do that.
Yeah, it's true.
You can, and it's awesome. I really like this. This is one of the coolest features for me. So if you're using the radio adapter, and the model number of that I'm blanking on right now, but if you're using that radio adapter with the SB5000s, yes, you can work manual, you can work TTL, and you can switch those up as much as you want, and you can adjust your power in third stop increments, which is very, very convenient if you're a speed light user. So that's probably a Joe McNally kind of special move there. I think he'll like that a lot. There's no, something to mention, no pop-up flash on here. Right. Okay, so you don't have that type of command. So to control wirelessly, I like radio. It works. That's why we use it. There's nothing to get in the way there. So that's what I like.
And that was a neat thing whenever we did the night water skiing stuff and the boats going, whenever it had gone away from us and had gone down course, I think it's the WR-A10 and WR-R10, is the transmitter, but it would light up red whenever it was out of range. And as the boat's coming toward me, boom, it turned green. I'm like, all right, everything's communicating. We're ready to go. And then bang, bang, bang.
Super cool. Nice. And that's another thing. Like the flash system is awesome. It's the little things that you take for granted, like in a system, but those little things that stack up, they lead to a coherent, special
that
product
make your life
or tool.
Easy.
Yeah, like high-speed sync. I think we all use that. Like one of the challenges with a flash system is that you feel like you're supposed to turn that on or set that up. I think what's nice with the Nikon, when you're over sync speed with your shutter, the flash system's already there. It's not an extra thing that you have to do. It's like, oh yeah, I know you want to do this, so let's go ahead and do that. I think that's really, really cool. All right, so here's a good question. I want to know more about the 3 RAW file sizes. Will it make a difference in quality of the image? And this person's coming from the D800. So yeah, there are 3 different flavors of RAW on the camera, and maybe some of us use some of those. I don't know. Anybody want to jump in on this?
I would say that I haven't used the RAW small on my D810 or D500. I believe both of those have that option. But just this morning, I was kind of reviewing the material for today, and it kind of hit me how great that actually is, because, we were talking about file sizes earlier. If you still want the latitude of being able to maybe edit in RAW, but have that file size be a little bit smaller, because, my work lives online, and I know a lot of people's work lives online. I still print things, but just to be able to have those smaller file sizes that you wouldn't necessarily ever want to blow up, especially for personal use. I mean, probably my personal photos aren't going to wind up on a billboard any day soon. So, yeah, I
never
think
know.
the smaller file sizes could be real handy for a lot of people.
Andrew?
I'm going to stay full size with everything that I shoot, but the day it was announced, when I finally got out of some meetings and I looked at my phone and it had blown up with text messages, and one of them was from a good buddy of mine, and he's a wedding shooter, and that was one of the first things he asked about was the 3 different RAW sizes, because he's like, I'll be at a reception. He's like, I don't need full 45.7 full resolution RAW files of people drinking, or partying and this, that, and the other. He was like, I can go smaller for that, but still have the latitude to be able to process a RAW. So
Yeah. If you shoot for print and you know what that's going to be, like if you're printing 8x10, if you're running a booth like on the street that's doing portraiture right then and there, and you know your output is going to be a certain size, I think it can be useful there. But I got to ask you, Matthew, you think you're...
I want the biggest size possible, because
Yeah.
who knows what the future holds. And I'm shooting celebrities and models, but I've shot people who, 15 years ago who were models who are now celebrities. I have friends who photographed Donald Trump, years ago. Who knew he'd be, president? You want the biggest file size you can get, because you don't know the future.
That's right. All right. Can't argue with that. All right. A question comes in here. Is it possible to take still images while shooting video with the D850? Anybody want to take this one?
That's a good question.
That is a good question.
All right.
Does
I'll
anybody
say,
know?
like, you really do need to move back and forth. You're kind of in one, you're doing
mode or
one
the
or
other.
the other. Now, there are some really cool features on the camera, and we didn't get to talk about this enough. There is an 8K time-lapse feature that's using the width of the sensor to shoot from, and that's essentially allowing you to take these stills, and then in post-production using third-party software, you can assemble that into a time-lapse. Likewise with the 4K video, something that I'm seeing a lot now, like for event shooting or for like a single action that's happening. If you needed to get something out for the web, you'll shoot video. You can use your nonlinear editor to isolate the frame and then export that from your timeline as a still. So the answer is no, you can't really do both at the same time exactly, but there's workarounds, there's techniques that would allow you to extrapolate like a shot. Okay, so this is a good one. You ready?
Bring it.
Okay. What from each of your individual perspectives do you feel are the D850's strengths and weaknesses?
Oh,
Ooh, that's a loaded question.
Absolutely.
ladies first.
Am I going first? I would say that its strengths, let's just start with the bright side of things, is its biggest strength is its flexibility. You just don't have to worry about, and I know I've said it probably 3 times today, you just don't have to worry about the gear. It's just going to do what you want it to do. Weaknesses for me are none, except that I have to buy one. But weaknesses for any of my viewers would be file size is a consideration, at least, just where you're going to store your images. But also your lenses. Definitely think about your lenses. If you're someone who is a DX shooter and you're thinking about stepping up to FX, this goes for any camera though, but think about your lenses. Do you have full frame lenses or do you have DX lenses? So now you can shoot DX with the D850. I have shot DX with my D810. It's nice because it does mask out the edges. You can visualize what you're looking at, but yeah, I don't want to sound too much like an ad here, but there just is not a lot of downside that I can think of.
Andrew, for you?
For me, the biggest thing would be the versatility of the camera. I mean, it just can perform in any situation. I think that's by far and away the strength, at least it's most relevant to me and how I shoot. When it comes to weaknesses, I think the one thing that I personally would change is I'd like to have dual XQDs. Just to be able to, that's by and large what I shoot on. So dual XQDs would be great. But, SD is a fine backup, but, all my D5s are configured for dual XQD. So it's just a really, really robust and fast card.
Yeah. The downside would be dual XQD for sure, because I'm so used now to having the ability to shoot with 2 XQD files, cards. That's great now. I'd want that, I think, maybe, but Weaknesses, I haven't discovered any yet. I do love the flexibility of being able to shoot. One camera can do both speed and high resolution at the same time. That's everything.
I think for me, like the big strengths that jump out, probably more than any other camera that's come before, is this sort of gets back to the DNA that was in the F line, where you had
Right.
a modular setup that could do a lot of things, and you could break that camera down if you wanted something smaller, just the body, or if you needed a faster frame rate, you could put on the sports back or the motor drive, that sort of thing. So I think one of the biggest strengths of the camera is how modular it is. I love that. I think something that maybe could be considered a challenge is the resolution. So if you're coming from even a full frame DSLR with lower megapixels, it takes some time to get used to a high resolution workflow.
I think the first moment they see what it looks like on their computer screen, that will go away.
I agree.
Good problem to have.
The
Yeah.
first time you see a high resolution file, you won't want to go back to anything else. Trust me.
I like that. All right, so here's a question from Lawton Photo 7. None of my Canon cameras are good at taking photos with live view. How accurate is the D850 if I want to shoot in live view? Anybody want to jump on that one?
It's accurate. That's
It's
it.
a Nikon.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's live view, and I think we're using contrast detection autofocus, I think, when you're using the live view. So be nice to see some phase detection in there for the speed. We see that in the mirrorless realm, but I think it's a really good compromise. Where you need the high speed autofocus, you're going to need to use the viewfinder. That's the thing. Like if focus is your critical thing in speed, then live view is probably not where you want to be. For speed, it's just it's a use case type of thing. But I think if you are in a situation where you're shooting something spontaneous, you need to move the camera to an odd angle, your subject and environment are somewhat cooperative with you, yeah, I think the live view is perfectly acceptable. I think it works for me.
I believe there's I can't remember what it's called, fine point autofocus with live view. There's something new in this camera where you can get more precise in how you focus, so it can be more accurate.
Cool. All right, so let's see. I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit to what one feature of the D850 do you feel will benefit your work the most, and why?
Great question. Can I say two?
I got the microphone.
Yeah.
I think you can. Yeah.
One, being able to go from 1-to-1 to square. That was huge for me, shooting it that way. I didn't think it would be until I experienced the process of doing it and how fast and easy it was to do that. That's going to change a lot. The way you compose when you're shooting square is very different. I think it's going to change my work. Also, being able to shoot in black and white and see it, because to imagine what it looks like in black and white is one thing, but to see it as you're shooting is another thing altogether. Those two things are going to change my work. I know. I think they already have. When I first shoot.
Isn't that cool when that happens?
Yeah, it is.
Andrew, what about you?
I mean, for me, it's the resolution, but there's one feature that I'm really looking forward to trying out, and that's the focus stacking. And so if you're doing some product stuff, I do some various work for, athletic clothing and footwear manufacturers. And so if you're doing something like that and I'm photographing a product, it's a new feature that I'm interested in trying out that I've never used before. So.
This is so cool, like the way that works is you kind of set up your initial focusing point, and the lens, the AF system will catch in for each successive image, changing the autofocus just slightly. And
It's so funny. The lens actually moves without you touching it.
yeah, it's so cool. Yeah,
It's
it's really cool, and that doesn't happen in camera, or the processing of those images doesn't happen in camera. You'll do that in post just like you normally do, but just the speed of being able to get to that, where you're not having to manually tweak that lens just a touch to get it to go. It's so cool. Yeah, and for you, Lee.
I think the one thing is the marriage of resolution and speed for this camera. I'm imagining myself trudging out of the Grand Canyon. I've been hiking for 10 miles already at least, and I'm tired. I don't want to get a different camera out of my bag. If I can be shooting the canyon in all of its beautiful reddish brown glory and then be able to turn around and take those quick shots of that raven that's flying by, I am in heaven.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Or a bear that's coming for you.
Yeah, he wanted to play.
Right.
Oh,
He didn't want to eat me.
Well, I think it's time for us to announce the winner of the brand new Nikon D850 body. Are you ready, folks? Let's do the drum roll, please. All right. Winner of the brand new Nikon D850 body is Lee Mosley. Lee, congratulations. Wow. We are so excited for you.
Hey.
We are all crazily envious, I want to say. And
They're going to love it.
I think you're going to really enjoy it. It's a fantastic camera. I've so enjoyed sitting and being able to talk with you all today. I want to thank our panelists again, Brittany Lee, Andrew Hancock, Matthew Jordan Smith. I'm photographer David Flores. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.